Today, my guest, you've seen across the WWE, AAA, New Japan, MLW. He's all over the world, and even the UFC. The original bro, Mr. Matt Riddle. Matt, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time out to do this today. I was just talking to. I know how hectic your schedule is. You're always somewhere, it seems, these days.
Which is a good thing, you know. Sometimes I wish I wasn't as busy, but if I wasn't, that would be bad. So just very busy, just hectic schedule, a lot of kids, you know. You know how it is.
Yes, sir. So, where did professional wrestling come into your life?
I would say it came into my life at a young age. I grew up in a house where we really didn't watch sports or idolize sports. And so we didn't watch football or baseball or basketball. It wasn't really anything on TV. I played sports. But when I was a kid, I think it was Hogan was already in WCW at this point. You know, so it was probably what, mid to late 90s,
Hmm.
early 90s maybe. Uh, but I remember watching a steel cage match with Hulk Hogan and the Giant, the Big Show,
Hmm.
and I was just hooked. And then I would watch, you know, Saturday Night Slam and everything, you know, Shotgun Saturday Night, Sunday night or Sunday morning Superstars on Fox, you
Hmm.
know, and I would, you know, record everything. Whatever TV wasn't being used, I'd record whatever I couldn't watch, you know.
Hmm.
And from there, it was just I just did wrestling, pro wrestling, and then when I was in seventh grade, that's when you know, I couldn't actually do pro wrestling. Nobody would allow me to, but I was allowed to start amateur wrestling in school, and that's what I, you know, did.
Is that what led you into mixed martial arts?
Yeah, well, you know, when I wanted to be a pro wrestler, hence I started wrestling in high school because a lot of guys say like Owen Hart, Kurt Angle, etc. The list goes on. There's like Cody Rhodes. Like a
Hmm.
bunch of guys had amateur backgrounds and then went into professional wrestling, and it seemed they had a better grasp on things than most of the other guys that just did professional wrestling. So I started doing that, and then when I got older, I won states and nationals. You know, I beat a couple notable people. Uh, and when I got to college, I was wrestling in college. Coach had to resign due to some issues. And when he lost his job, kind of, when he left, I kind of lost my scholarship and things like that. And the new coach came in, and I was just like, what am I doing? You know, it's like, and at this point, I was like, do I do pro wrestling? But at this era, most of the pro wrestlers were still very big. It was the early 2000s.
Hmm.
I would say ruthless aggression
Hmm.
right after attitude, and a lot of the guys were quite large, other than like Rey Mysterio. But even Rey Mysterio at that time was pretty thick, you know. And everybody was very big, and I was probably walking around at 180, and I was still 6'1", but I didn't see myself making it in pro wrestling at the time. But with mixed martial arts and the Ultimate Fighter came out, I think it came out my freshman year of college. Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin had that fight, legendary, and it made the sport blow up and take off faster than it was the fastest growing sport in the world. I don't think it might still be, maybe
Hmm.
Power Slap is, but it was the fastest growing sport in the world at that time. There was weight classes, and I felt like, hey, you know, I'm a state national champion wrestler. I'm pretty scrappy, and this is something I've always wanted to do as well. And I felt like there was more of a pathway
Hmm.
to MMA and the UFC with the Ultimate Fighter show and stuff like that, rather than WWE, where there's a. And I'll tell you this, even after doing both, pro wrestling, fighting's hard,
Hmm.
right? But if you beat people up and win, you go up. Well, in pro wrestling, that's not the case. It's a lot of politicking, knowing people, being able to work well with others, regardless of what the internet says, because they've never been in a damn locker room with me. But you can't have matches with guys like Roman and Randy and all these top people and not be good at some aspect of this, you
Hmm.
know? Or you wouldn't be in the WWE and main events on pay per views. It's just one of those things. Uh, so yeah, that's when I made the transition to pro wrestling or MMA, and then when I got fired from the UFC, that's when I made the jump to pro wrestling.
So during your time in MMA, how hard was it for you to, or was it even hard to jump into that world with training? Was it something you found easy to learn and adapt?
For mixed martial arts,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, easy. So even before I started training, like officially, I was a bunch of the guys I've wrestled with were also big mixed martial arts fans, and a lot of us would we bought bag gloves, and we
Hmm.
would spar each other after practice or on off days or in the off season especially. And it's funny because we're all friends, but the amount we would fight, and we would like. So, some of the guys would fight at parties. I mean, I saw this one fight at a party where these guys had a whole MMA fight in a gravel parking lot with cars and everything. And then the cops came, and then the two guys that are like covered in blood fighting sprint off into the darkness. You know? So that's you gotta also realize when I started training mixed martial arts and fighting, it wasn't legal most places. It wasn't
Hmm.
legal in Pennsylvania or New York. Like it was like legal in California, Colorado, Nevada, maybe Florida, and then everywhere else, like you either had to fight on an Indian reservation, and training wise, like you either had to train like in the basement of gyms because they would shut the gym down if they did MMA, but you
Hmm.
could do gyms that did boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, judo, jiu-jitsu. You could basically have single disciplines, but it was illegal to combine them all and practice and fight. So at that time, there was a lot of underground training, like going to like heavy like lifting gyms, and then they open up like the floor, and you crawl down to the attic. There was a wrestling mat and spider webs everywhere, and then you just like try to knock each other out. So it was definitely a different era when I started training, but I picked it up quick. Like I said, I was a scrappy kid. Not that I got into a lot of fights,
Hmm.
but I was definitely in the position to get into a lot of fights, and because of my wrestling background, I was able to handle a lot of those
Hmm.
situations. And then when I moved to mixed martial arts, it was I'm very I'm one of those people that if I see it in a book or on in a video or and watching a fight, I can usually mimic it and do it and then make it my own. So I think that was one of my bit even with pro wrestling, just
Hmm.
the ability of I've been watching it for so long. When I got in a pro wrestling ring the first time, I could hit basically every move. The only thing is though, I didn't know. You know, in America, you're supposed to suplex with your left arm and work the left side. That's the only thing I didn't know. So I came in, I just started suplexing people, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! You gotta do this side. This is the side we work." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But even outside of that, it was like something I've watched for years, something I wanted to do, something I was like in my back of my head was training to do. So it was quite easy.
So after you left the UFC, how long was it between the pro wrestling was what you were going to do next?
But when I got fired from the UFC, I tried to, hold on,
Hmm.
still get some fights. And I was fighting, I signed a one fight with Legacy FC a contract, but then they ended up not being able to afford me for what they signed me for. So then they just auctioned me off to Bellator. I can't go into details of Bellator because they made me sign a something, or we signed something. But regardless, I didn't fight for Bellator, but I was also probably one of the only fighters that was ever released from Bellator from their contracts because they are very stingy with the contracts and they hold you to it, and they're not the greatest, or at least they weren't, or they didn't used to be. I think they have different management, what have you, and matchmakers, so things might be better now. But when I was there, it wasn't great. And then I was kind of in limbo. I ended up fighting for Titan FC, which I loved, but the pay was very minimal, and I had three kids, and I was honestly the WWE Network came out, and I was broke, but it was only $9.99, and I could even afford that. And I was watching a lot of Legends of Wrestling and all the other shows, plus all the pay-per-views that I wanted to watch,
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? And seeing guys like Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth, Daniel Bryanson, uh, seeing all these guys have such success at the highest level, And and I thought to myself, and this isn't a knock to them, like they're outstanding. They're some of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestlers in the world. But in my head, I was like, I think I could bring a different element to
Hmm.
this. I have a UFC background. I'm a world champion in jiu-jitsu, a state and national champion, and I'm just like, I think I should do this, and I think the size thing isn't as big of a deal now. I think the world of the company, especially with the UFC, realize a guy that weighs 200 pounds can probably knock out a heavyweight or
Hmm.
light heavyweight. It doesn't matter if you're 6'6" or 6'2" now, you
Hmm.
know? So I think the door was open. And at that point, I started wrestling on the indies. And at this point, the indies weren't that big. I think I went to an ROH camp and Roderick Strong was running it. I think Adam Cole's. There's a bunch of people from ROH at the time, and I think in Delirious, and they were all like, there's probably about 250 active independent pro wrestlers at that time. That was
Hmm.
probably like 12 years ago, 13 years ago, right? And now you fast forward to today, or even 4 years from then, the independent scene blew up. It was insane. Like I was wrestling 5, 6 days a week in other countries, in America, everywhere. And I remember doing a tour with Cody Rhodes, and Cody was like, this is Cody Rhodes. Like, he doesn't need to be here. He could probably wrestle if he could go back to WWE or anything.
Hmm.
And he's like, dude, why would I? He's like, the boom on the independent scene is so big. And, dude, he was flying first class everywhere. I was flying coach, but I was flying everywhere just next to him. And
Hmm.
we were, a lot of us, a lot of the good wrestlers at that time on the indies, I was making one hell of a living, and even now I still am. And but the indie scene wasn't what it was until that network came out. I think it put a lot more eyes on professional wrestling and the backstages and the stories and everything. And that's what got me into it. And I
Hmm.
think that's what blew up the independent scene that let somebody like myself and say others, like say even like an Austin Theory or a Keith Lee, etc., shine on the indies and finally get their shot, be it with WWE or AEW, TNA, MLW,
Hmm.
whoever, but the indies, it was a great time.
Do you feel like coming from the UFC and your fighting background that you had momentum with you launching into professional wrestling, that a lot of people were interested in bringing you in and seeing, this transitional phase for you into professional wrestling, like you were a draw already without ever
Yeah.
stepping into the ring?
So yes and no. So when it comes to like the internet, and even now, like I can't say or do anything without there being 100 articles written about it.
Hmm.
Which I mean, I'll say this: a lot of pro wrestlers would kill for that attention because in pro wrestling, we know what it is. Everybody knows what it is. So how do you make people interested in it?
Hmm.
And you got to be a character. You got to have something else that brings people to the table. John Cena used to freestyle and be jacked. Like
Hmm.
there's certain people have certain strengths, and with me, the MMA background definitely drew a lot of people in. Also, I feel like if you went to a pro wrestling match with a friend that thought it was corny, and then you're like, well, that dude fought in the UFC, and it kind of adds some legitimacy. So I think from a promoter's point of view, in that sense, fan point of view, from that sense. But I would also say when I first started pro wrestling, especially when I got to work, say, like Evolve and
Hmm.
the bigger independent shows, I got booed. They hated me because they were like, "You're an MMA guy taking
Hmm.
pro wrestler spots. You're not good." Blah blah blah. And I remember probably my first weekend with Evolve, I was wrestling in Long Island, and the crowd chanted, "You can't wrestle." And I remember them saying that. And the match wasn't bad. It's not like I did anything that
Hmm.
was terrible. It was a good 6 minute pro wrestling match. It was quick to the point. It was good. But they chanted that. It wasn't because I couldn't wrestle. They just didn't like me and they didn't want me there. And then eventually, a couple months go by. I get more match time. The matches are getting better, bigger, cooler. I'm getting better opponents, say like Cedric
Hmm.
Alexander and Trevor Lee, Cameron Grimes, and like getting top tier opponents so I can have top tier matches. And then after that, once they gave me the ball and let me run with it, and I proved that I could, it was game on.
How did your appearances with Evolve begin, and what was it like working with Gabe?
Well, my appearances at Evolve began with a tryout with WWE, which I killed.
Hmm.
But getting fired from the UFC for smoking weed and having a mushroom tattoo on your rib cage, even if you're a decent-looking, rich dude that can wrestle, wasn't enough for them.
Hmm.
So at that point, they took a pass on me. But at the time, Canyon Seaman was working for them, and they suggested or asked, have you ever heard of Evolve, and would you ever consider working for them? And I had no idea what Evolve was. I was still very new and green to the independent scene of wrestling, but I watched it. And Evolve's not around anymore, but Evolve style was more of they had pro wrestling, but it was more of a shoot style pro
Hmm.
wrestling. Guys like Tim Thatcher, myself, Zack Sabre Jr., and we were able. It was like a wrestling show kind of made around somebody with my background, I thought.
Hmm.
And after the first time I talked to Gabe, Gabe was talking to me, and I talk like I do. And Gabe's like, "Oh, we want to make you a killer like Ken Shamrock, and you do this and that, and you like flip out." And I'm like, "All right, all right, all right, cool, cool. Yeah, that sounds all right. I can do that." And then we end the conversation. Then he calls me back 2 minutes later, and he goes, "So all that stuff I just said, that's really not you, is it?" And I'm like, "No, not at all, man. Like, I mean, I can like kick beat up people. I'm like really good at fighting, but I'm not like somebody that like punches himself in the face and like screams. And yeah, I'm more like I just take care of business. And I think that's the other thing that MMA has done a lot for pro wrestling in the sense back in the day, like you had to like scream and be like, oh, like I'm gonna kill it. And now somebody like me with legitimacy can just
Hmm.
talk, and I can smash your face in if I really choose to do so, and that has its own value. Just like a Conor McGregor will talk, he's not always screaming and pissed. A lot of times he's ripping jokes and making you look like an ass.
Uh-huh.
Or even like the Diaz brothers, they just have their own swag, and it's like, yo, wait till we get in the ring. And I think that really helped my transition as well because then fans can look at the legitimacy, look at my body of work in the ring, and even though I'm a little goofy and make jokes, they also know I'm like a killer.
Hmm.
So I think it's the perks of that rather than just screaming all the time.
Hmm. So working with Evolve, was there always talks with WWE during this? Like they were obviously watching you.
So at a point, I was working for Evolve, and so I was under the impression like, hey, I work Evolve to
Hmm.
get to WWE, and then after my first Mania with Evolve, where I wrestled Zack Sabre Jr., Tim Thatcher, and then me and Catchpoint Drew Gulak and Tracy Williams, Hot Sauce at the time, we had a match, but after that they hit me up, and WWE was like, hey, we're not gonna sign you. And I
Hmm.
was like, and I get Katie called me, and I could tell in his voice like he expected like anger, or frustration, or anything, and I was just like, cool. And
Hmm.
he's like, cool, and I was like, yeah, cool. Like, I mean, if that's your choice, like, cool. But in the back of my head, I was like, I'm gonna make you regret that, and I'm gonna become so undeniable and so valuable on the independent scene. You're gonna come back and you're gonna pay me what I ask. And over the course of the next couple of years, that's exactly what I did. I was probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, independent star at the time. And New Japan and everybody else wanted a piece of me. And once that happened, WWE didn't want me to go somewhere else to be the competition. And Triple H called me and offered me a job.
Did you ever? I mean, obviously that was the goal. Was there ever any second thoughts? I mean, when Triple H calls you, usually I don't know how many people say
Uh,
no.
Well, it wasn't second thoughts. For me, I think the big thing is I wanted to be used properly.
Hmm.
I knew in Japan, if I went there, they would have used me properly, just like when I went to Japan this past, I think February and won the television championship.
Hmm.
And so I think that was my biggest concern going to WWE. A lot of guys get lost in the shuffle. At this time, they're signing everybody and anyone. This like Keith Lee was already there. Basically, the only reason I wasn't signed is because I smoked too much weed. And
Hmm.
that was an issue then. Now it's not an issue at all. You know, it's not even an issue in the UFC. I could take a drug test for the UFC and be fine right now.
Yeah.
But back in 2012 and 13 wasn't the case. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, but with WWE, it's just a smart move. I have kids. I'll get paid more money, and on a television product where even if I do get fired, you know, which was going to be inevitable, you know,
Mm-hmm.
everybody eventually gets fired at one point. But I knew once you work for WWE, your value goes through the roof, you know, and especially with me being a part of RKO Bro,
Mm-hmm.
Wrestling Roman, United States Championship, NXT Tag Champs, Dusty Cup winner. And it's not like I was there and sat on the sidelines most of the time. Even when I wasn't winning titles, I was usually getting beat up by a top guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always on TV, and to me, the more you're on TV, the more valuable you get. You got generations of children, adults, grown like older people that have been watching, and if you can be on that television for 5 years every week, week in and week out, it pays off. And a couple years on the sidelines hurts, and you can see it at meet and greets and other things. But I was on TV full time all the time
Mm-hmm.
with Randy, without Randy. I was always used for something because I was dependable once we got in the ring and everything else. So it did. It worked, you know. And like I said, I went to Japan. I mean, I wrestled in Mexico. I win titles down there. I wrestled for MLW. I'm about to wrestle for the MLW Heavyweight Championship in Texas in January. And yeah, you know, now granted, before WWE, I was also wrestling for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
championships as well, but it definitely didn't hurt. And I know I made the right decision at that aspect
Mm-hmm.
because of the money I made and being able to be with my family and etc. You know.
You know, you said it was important to be able to be who, used the way you wanted to be. Did you ever not believe Triple H during these conversations, or was Triple H the right person to talk to ensure that this was going to go the way it was
Triple H
supposed
is
to?
definitely the right person for this. Also, at this time, we were talking NXT, so Triple
Hmm.
H and Shawn Michaels have great minds for this business, and when they were running NXT wholeheartedly and by themselves for the most part, and yeah, I was very confident that he wouldn't bamboozle me, and even if I wasn't gonna get like the rub in the sense of win every match and
Hmm.
get put over. I was going to be able to have the match time I desired to put on the best show because they knew what I was capable of, and they also knew what the talent was capable of in NXT at that time. You know, because at that time, not saying NXT roster is still stacked right now,
Hmm.
but dude, when I was there, you got Keith Lee, you got myself, you got Undisputed Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, you got Aleister Black, who's Malachi now. I mean, like I could keep Ricochet. I
Hmm.
mean, it was a stacked NXT roster. The takeovers were sold out every time, and so I was confident Triple H used me properly. And honestly, if you watch my NXT run, I'm a little goofy, but once I'm in that ring,
Hmm.
I'm a beast, right? And then once I got up to the main roster, things got a little different, you know. Not taking anything away, people have their visions. Like I said, like it's not about who wins every match in WWE. It's a lot of politics and networking, figuring out where you fit best in this puzzle piece at this
Hmm.
moment. And don't get me wrong, your puzzle piece might change, you know. And you've seen over the years where guys start at the bottom and now they're world champions, you know. And for a second, like look at like say Damian Priest. He was like in Judgment Day, but he was usually the guy just getting hit, and he
Hmm.
would do the run-ins trying to save Finn or Edge or whoever else. And then he cashed in. He won Money in the Bank, then cashed in at WrestleMania, won the title, and I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. You
Hmm.
know, it's like that. Look at the transition. You know, look at how you know. So and even me, like I started off just. I mean, I beat AJ, but then lost to AJ, lost my feud with Corbin. Like, I'm
Hmm.
usually just getting beat up. Bobby Lashley, after I lost the U.S. title, Bobby Lashley squashed me for 10 minutes. I even asked the Purdue, like, do I get any offense? And they go, no offense. No, I go. They go. You can throw kicks, and then he'll no sell them, and then just beat you. And that there was days where I showed up to work like that, and I remember my mom called me once and being like, "Matt, if that's gonna happen, tell us so we don't have to watch." And I'm just like, "Mom, like it's a show," but but yeah, but to me that didn't matter. It's like as long as I'm part of the show, I'm having fun. If I can make Bobby or whoever else in the ring look like a monster or beast, that's what I'm here for. Also WWE is a world of giants. On the indies right now, I'm a giant. I'm like
Mhm.
6'2" and like 220, like, and I'm
Mhm.
ripped. So it's like I'm huge. WWE 6'2" and 220 is a dime a dozen. I
Mhm.
mean, I have pretty sweet abs, but outside of that, dude, a lot of these guys are way bigger than me. So, and at the time Vince was very much a body guy.
Mhm.
And but like I said, loved working under him, loved working under Triple H. They're both great. They both had two different visions, and they both, and I just found where I could fit into their products. And
Mhm.
even now, that's kind of what I do. A little more on the indies, things are tailored around me,
Mhm.
which is nice, but not necessary.
Yeah.
And but yeah, with WWE Triple H, I knew he would use me properly at that, and even on the main roster when he had say, and Vince had his own, you know, but like Vince is like that. I remember when we were in Saudi and I rode the camel, and Randy was like, "I want to ride a camel," and I was like, "Yeah, Randy." He's like, "Yeah, get Randy on a camel," and then Vince is like, "No," and Randy's like, "Why not?" He's like, "Because your character wouldn't ride a camel."
What the hell does that
And
mean?
I'm like, what a simple answer. So but like I said, I enjoyed working under both of them. I loved working for NXT, WWE. I love wrestling.
Mhm.
I wish it didn't hurt as much and we didn't get beat up as much. But that's kind of part of the fun, and I love it. Just like I liked fighting, loved fighting, and everything else. And maybe I fight again one day. I'm gonna be wrestling like every
Mhm.
weekend for like the unforeseeable future. So yeah.
When you signed with NXT, did they want to change anything, or was it easy for you to adapt to their style, or was it
No,
something you were already transitioning to do, working with
I think
Evolve?
that I was working on the transitions. I think the biggest thing is TV.
Mhm.
And on the indies, they don't really care as long as you're like kind of doing your job.
Mhm.
So like on the indies, like you can look into the camera. WWE you can't look directly into the camera unless you're told to, right?
Mhm.
So that was something I had to get used to. Because I'd see the camera guy and be like, yeah, and they're like, look over the camera. Look at like somebody in the crowd above the camera, but don't look directly into it. So like that, and then working hard cam more so. But I was doing that on the indies, but now it just like matters more because it's WWE and there's a huge crowd in an arena, and you need to do this on your entrance because there's millions of people watching at home. Don't look like an idiot and get show them your back, stuff like that. But yeah, and commercials.
Mhm.
One of the main reasons I'll say this now. One of the main reasons why I haven't really gone out of my way for another TV opportunity in wrestling at the moment is I really don't want to wrestle with commercials. And maybe don't get me wrong, the money's worth it,
Mhm.
but it's just brutal. And then when you go out there and you call a match, and then the ref comes up to you and he goes, "Hey, you had 8 minutes, you have 4," and the guy still hasn't done his entrance, and you're like, so everything we called isn't going. It's like, and then once he gets in the ring, 2 minutes, and you're like, tell him break spot, and then you go right to the break spot, dude. And then you
Mhm.
then you start them. Then during break, they tell you you got the time back in the second half, and you're like, ah, So it's but at the same time, the show must go on. It's
Mhm.
live TV. That's what happens in the situations we're in. Somebody goes long on a promo, or a match goes long, or a match goes too short, or somebody miscalculates the time, and they're like, oh, wait, they did have that time. Whatever it is, things happen. I'll say this, very stressful. It's
Mhm.
very stressful to be, to have to memorize lines, spots, and positions where people get seriously hurt or die,
Mhm.
and then do it on live TV. But I will say this now, with Triple H completely under control for the most part, everything's pretty smooth. When I
Mhm.
was there, before I left, there was no surprises most of the time. If
Mhm.
it was a surprise, maybe we didn't know about it, but the producers and
Mm-hmm.
the TV knew about it, right? With Vince, very erratic, and people would kind of diss it. But I also think what he was trying to do, because a lot of people go through the motions, and you starts getting boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want it to be kind of like, oh my God, what are we doing next? So you have that excitement, you know, and there's more of a real feel. So I get where he was coming from. Like he wanted that raw, intense,
Mm-hmm.
really feeling it. While, you know, others would rather have a smooth operating oiled machine with no hiccups. You know, but I would
Mm-hmm.
say both work because sometimes you get really good TV out of what was planned, and sometimes you get really good TV when that wasn't planned at all. Like
Yeah.
when I was talking to Asuka and I forgot my lines, you know, and people still hit me up and they go, "Dude, that was one of the funniest things I ever saw." Vince thought it was hilarious. Bruce Pritchard, Randy really thought it was funny, you know. And I was worried I was going to get fired or in trouble or taken off TV, and they're like, "Perfect, that was perfect for your character," and I was like, "Sweet, cool." I won't. They're like, don't do it again though. But I won't. You know, I won't make it a regular thing. So yeah.
Was there any particular moments that stand out more than others during your time in NXT?
Or I mean, in NXT, man. I mean, I had some great matches. I had a takeover match with Roderick Strong that I would, if anybody asked what matches I should watch, I'd be like, that's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Cole and me had a banger when we are going head to head with AE Dubs the first night they were debuting. Of course, we had to match their TV slot and do zero commercials for the first hour just to be jerks because that's what you do to rival companies. Uh, but I don't know, man. I had a lot. I really just enjoyed my whole run in NXT. I was booked as a beast, but I was also goofy and fun. The Broserweights was a great team I had with Stallion Pete, and Pete Dunne really elevated my tag team wrestling game. You know, I think if it wasn't for Pete, if me and Randy would have teamed up, it wouldn't have had the success it had. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
Pete Dunne's probably he's got one of the best minds for professional wrestling, and that's why he is where he is today. Let alone his in ring ability, you know. But with NXT, it was just great working with guys like Shawn Michaels, Pete Dunne, and then Undisputed. I really enjoyed working with Undisputed at that time. They were so over, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so easy to be in a match with them. Adam Cole is so good. Kyle O'Reilly is so good. Roderick Strong is so good. Bobby Fish, how much fish could Bobby Fish fry, man? Is so good, and it was like a perfect storm. Like I said, my time at NXT, I felt like NXT was the bigger, better
Mm-hmm.
brand at the time. Even if we weren't pulling the numbers, the actual in-ring
Mm-hmm.
performances were insane, you know? So,
When it came time to go to the main roster, did you have any concerns? Were you ready for it? Because you've seen other people that are huge in NXT and they go up, and it's just like
well,
they
and
didn't
I think
see it.
that Yeah, I think that was part of their problem. You know, a lot of them, they have you have a certain you're comfortable at NXT. You
Mm-hmm.
don't travel all the time. You feel at that time you were filming TV maybe once a week. You know, or before that they're doing two tapings every other week. You know, so it's a very lax schedule. You get to stay in one spot for the most part, and I think people get comfortable in that. Main roster is built on being uncomfortable. You better love being uncomfortable because every day is a travel day. You're wrestling in a different town. You're going to work different people all the time. Main roster locker room has a lot more egos. I would say NXT probably does too, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
usually don't see that stuff. But main roster, when you have people there that have been doing it for a decade or longer and you come up into their office,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not that they're going to be mean per se, but you're going to have to prove yourself one way or another. And with me, when I came up to the main roster, damn, like my debut, the day I debuted, I got me too'd, which was garbage. But at the same time, imagine going into a locker room with all these legends and
Mm-hmm.
people, and they just read on Twitter and the internet that this X, Y, and Z happened, and
Mm-hmm.
they like meet you and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like, I didn't do anything, but they don't know that. And then eventually over time, getting to know me and then seeing how everything played out, everything was cool and they get it, because a lot of the guys and a lot of the girls have been in similar situations, and
Mm-hmm.
to think, my whole life I've been working to get to the WWE as a child. Like this was the dream. This is the
Mm-hmm.
goal. And then I wrestle AJ Styles, and then something horrific like that comes out. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, like all those
Yeah.
meetings we had and everything, they were right, dude. People will do this,
Mm-hmm.
and but yeah, but at the same time, like I said, there's some egos, but if you're humble, you're nice, you work hard, I think that's it. If you work hard and you put people over and you make, even if you win, lose or draw, everybody leaves looking better than when they went into the match. We all win. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was what I always try to do. I always wanted to try to leave that ring making sure everybody got a little more claps, a little more handshakes, a little more respect after the match. And I think that's what I did while I was there.
Did they have any initial plans for when he went to the main roster, or did it kind of just change all the time?
Basically, what happened was Vince saw me do the how much fish could buy fish fry if buy fish could fry fish, and heard me sing it and being entertaining. And then he hit up Canyon. He goes, Canyon, I want him up to the main roster. I was like, sweet. Of course, I had to drop the titles and do a couple other things. There's a lot of moving pieces in
Mm-hmm.
WWE. So even if they're like, we want you, I want you, it's still going to take a couple months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in my case, a couple months turned into like a couple more months because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
COVID hit, and then everything was locked down. But then I finished up I did the fight pit with Tim Thatcher. That was my last match at NXT. And then I moved up to the main roster during the Thunderdome era.
How hard was that era?
I loved it.
You loved it?
I loved it. I loved it. You got to realize I live in Florida. Wrestling was an essential business. We
Mm-hmm.
only filmed once every 2 weeks, and yeah, I was getting paid a lot of money, and I was only working once every 2 weeks, and then they pipe in noises and stuff like that. But I think for me, I'm used to performing like that. I was
Mm-hmm.
on the Ultimate Fighter where if you don't know, on the original Ultimate Fighter, you're basically in a warehouse in Las
Mm-hmm.
Vegas next to another warehouse that holds limousines, and you just fight in there. And there's probably like 10 or 15 like camera crew, sound people, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
producers in the back in a hidden room, and then the fighters. So it's like, and it's very awkward to
Mm-hmm.
fight and try to break somebody's face open in front of like 30 people, but I'm used to it. And then when I went to WWE and then the Thunderdome, hey, I've performed in front of less people and in front
Mm-hmm.
of more silent crowds where I'm actually trying to kill people. So wasn't new to me, but I really liked the Thunderdome for one reason. And there's certain people that became more stars after the Thunderdome that weren't appreciated before. I
Mm-hmm.
think with my background and my in ring ability, I was one of them because I was, when people were like, yo, Riddle killed it during COVID, Another one, and I can't speak higher about him, is Sheamus.
Mm-hmm.
Sheamus during the Thunderdome era, and trust me, I wrestled him a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
That guy went hard in the Thunderdome era. One time I wrestled Sheamus and I was hurt going into the match. I was like, my rib hurts. I think I cracked it, whatever. We wrestled and he beat me up so bad, my rib didn't hurt anymore. I don't know if another part of my body hurt more and I just didn't feel the rib anymore. But dude, he cured my hurt rib. I don't know if he punched me in it or what. But dude, before the match, I was like, I don't even know how I'm gonna do this. And then you get in there with Sheamus, and you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
But but during the Thunderdome era, he killed it. I killed it. Others killed it as well. But for me, I think it helped in a way because I wasn't worried about crowd reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I was just worried about what I had to do and get done in the ring.
Is there any particular matches that you liked more during your main roster run? I know everybody tells you theirs. Is there any matches that people may not know were special to you?
Oh man, I mean, Seth Rollins and me killed it. I liked our match more at fight at the Clash at the Castle, even though he beat me there.
Mm-hmm.
The one in the fight pit, I wanted to do a couple other things in the match, but some people weren't keen on it. I'm not going to mention names. I'm not trying to bury anybody. But I want to do a couple things that probably would have been insane in that cage and everything. But we weren't able to do that. And then it was great. And I'm happy. And for everything. But that night, some people that were involved in my match were a little upset because somebody was making their debut. The Fiend was coming
Mm-hmm.
back, and they felt like it took away from certain matches because they were chanting, "We want the Fiend" throughout the most of the pay-per-view, Extreme Rules in Philly. Which
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind. The guy was making his comeback. He's been out for a minute. I don't know, he was like wrongfully fired after Mania, right? After he
Mm-hmm.
lost to Randy. You know, the curse of Randy Orton. Dude, anybody that's teamed with Randy that usually gets fired. It's just a thing. That's not his fault. It's my fault. Whatever. But I really enjoyed the Seth match in Wales, and then I really enjoyed my match with Roman. You know, but my favorite would have to be WrestleMania Dallas. You know, Triple Threat, Street Profits, Alpha Academy, RK Bro, and
Mm-hmm.
we retain the titles. Me hitting a springboard cutter on Tez, and then Randy hitting one on Chad Gable for the victory, and we retained our championships. So that was probably the best. There was like 70,000 people. All the moves went perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It was fireworks start to finish. It's the way I like to wrestle. So that's probably to date my favorite match on the main roster. But the other, you know, like I said, the one with Roman, you know, yesterday I was watching the clip where he went to spear me and I hit him with an RKO in the crowd. There's a guy wearing we the ones in the crowd, and he was just like oh, like Riddle's gonna do it, you know. And for me to get somebody to feel like that and have that whole crowd on their feet, you know, that's special. Just like at WrestleMania and other things. Also, my U.S. title match with Sheamus at
Mm-hmm.
WrestleMania where I dropped it. He kicked me. He hit me with a bro kick at the end of the match and kicked me dead in my face as I was doing a backflip. He must have moved my bottom row of teeth back like half an inch at least, dude. I was in pain. But no.
Was there anything that you would have liked to have accomplished in WWE or stuff that maybe was
I
pitched or you pitched that didn't happen?
uh I loved everything I did. I wish I would have been able to finish the run with Randy, you know, with
Mm-hmm.
his injuries, and then even at some point when we first started teaming up, he got COVID and was out for a couple months. He got it really bad, and then with the injuries, he'd have to take weeks off there and there. And then I was honestly waiting for him to come back, and we were doing like the McRiddle thing with Drew McIntyre. You know, I'm loving it. You know, I feel like, but at the same time, I feel like that was just gonna. I was just a stepping stone for Drew to do his heel turn, regardless. And look at Drew killing it as the heel, the Scottish psychopath that he wanted to be. You know. And but like I said, I think the one thing I really wanted to finish was me and RK Bro. RK Bro has some, you know, some untied and
Mm-hmm.
some loose ends, if you will. And it would be nice to finish that, even if it's just me getting punted and I leave, whatever. It would be nice to put like a period at the end of it. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, that's kind of like the story of my life. You know, in the UFC, 5 fight win streak, beating top ranked fighters, ranked top 10 in the world at welterweight. You smoke weed, you're fired. You know, WWE, you're killing it. Your partner gets hurt, but you're kind of just the guy that gets beat up by the bloodline all the time or what have you, which is fine. But then, you know, you go to the airport, you have a couple cocktails, you know, and shit goes wrong. People say stuff to you, whatever. At the end of the day, things happen. I am where I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I would honestly, people would probably yell at me, but I wouldn't change it for the world. You know, it's just, that's just who I am, and you're supposed to have ups and downs. You know,
Mm-hmm.
life's on a wavelength. You know, peaks and valleys, as Tim Thatcher would say. Peaks and valleys. So, but yeah, but RK Bro, I'd like to finish that. But if I don't, me and
Uh-huh.
Randy are still friends. He texts me and messages me all the time, and that feels good enough. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm happy.
When your release came, did you know that professional wrestling was something you were still going to pursue, or did going back to MMA cross your mind? Or,
Going back to MMA still crosses my mind all the time. I would love to fight again. I think the problem with mixed martial arts, and it was a problem I had even when I was doing it, is the lack of compensation, you know?
mm-hmm.
And not even the lack. You might make, say, I might, you know, with my name, make 20 or $40,000 in a night, depending on where I fight. But I can only fight once a month, or if I don't get hurt or injured, and and every time if you lose, you're gonna get paid less. Your stock goes down. So it's a weird like little limbo. And right now, my schedule, I'm booked. I think until like almost like March. Every weekend wrestling, at least once a weekend, if not twice, 3 times, or 4 times. And it's like I get paid pretty good when I wrestle these days. The rate has gone up from $50, so that's good. Because when I worked for Evolve, that's what I'd get paid for 2 shows. I'd get paid $50. This is probably my fault. I'm not good at negotiating. I basically I told Gabe, hey, I'll do it for a case of beer. He gave me $50, so I guess that's a pretty expensive case of beer. But the rate's a lot higher now. I work a lot more, and I'm in demand. So it's hard to. I want to fight, but it's hard to like say, hey, I'm going to take the next 4 or 6 weeks off from wrestling to train for this fight because I don't want to get beat up and look like a scrub. Because that's not what I do. I'll take it serious and train my ass off. So I haven't found that time. I haven't had more than a week or two gap in between, and the only reason I've had gaps is because I live in Florida and there's been hurricanes going like crazy. So they ended now. Hurricane season's over, but that definitely was probably my biggest break from wrestling was that. And now back at it this weekend. I think AAW Chicago Friday. So if anybody's in Chicago, check it out.
So life after WWE, it's been great.
Yeah, it's great, I really enjoy having my life, in the sense like if I don't want to do something, I don't have to do it, and I can make choices, and that was something that I hadn't been able to do for a long time. And even before WWE, the only way you get there is by basically doing that. So it was a good like decade or so of not having any control over my lifetime or schedule. And I felt like when I got released, this was good. And look, I look at the pros and the cons. Cons, I got fired. Am I going to get paid millions of dollars? Pros, Dana White's not my boss. I don't work for TKO. Another pro is, there's a huge lawsuit against them. I'm part of that because I fought for them a bunch during that time period. So I'm going to collect my check. So technically, even though I got fired, I'm still getting paid. So thank you, TKO, UFC, for that. WWE, love you guys. But yeah, I love it. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty stoked. Everybody has ups and downs, but right now, little Matthew's walking around, killing. I had another kid. He's killing it, and I got a house. I got cars. Now I just need to work and make sure I keep paying my bills and I keep everything, and that's about it. And if not, I can always just sell everything because I bought it all.
That's true.
So I'm in a. Sometimes I get stressed out, but I'm in a very good position that most people would dream to be in. So I just try to think of it like that and appreciate what I have, and I have a lot. So it's awesome. And like I said, I talk to Randy all the time, and Randy always tells me he's like, because I'm teaming up with his dad in December, and he was making jokes. He told me I'm gonna have to take all the bumps. He's like, you thought you bumped for me a lot. You're gonna take all the bumps in that match. And I was like, oh, I bet. And he goes, when are you gonna come back here? And I go, hopefully one of these days. But till then, I'll do the next best thing and team up with your dad. So so yeah, but like I said, everything's great, and I take it one day at a time. Stay out of trouble the best I can because it seems anywhere I go, I get in trouble. So stay home a lot and play video games. And hang out with my kids. I see when I'm with my kids or playing video games, nobody writes bad articles about me, but we'll see.
So WWE is something you would return to eventually down the road if given the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If they would ever have me back, I would definitely go back, I think for me though, I think the amount of time I was working there and the long length of time I worked there, I think I was just a little overwhelmed, and then having me go to rehab for a couple months. I don't know if you know anything about rehab. It's not a vacation. It's like fun, dude. I was like, it was dude. It was brutal. It's brutal. It's very hard. If anything, I don't want to sound bad, but like I think it made things worse, but But and I think going right from there, right back to TV, traveling, and all that,
Hmm.
that stress, having another kid on the way, having to do everything else that I do. I think it was just too much for me, and I
Hmm.
got overwhelmed. And then it took one comment from one
Hmm.
person, regardless if I was drunk off my ass or whatever. And I was in the wrong in that sense. I know that. But dude, I'm usually a pretty cool guy. But if somebody crosses the line or mentions certain things about me, I'm gonna go off, and I
Hmm.
did. And I paid the price, still paying the price. But like I said, just like when I got fired from the UFC for smoking weed, it's a blessing in disguise. I got to
Hmm.
work for WWE and become this top star,
Hmm.
And then even with WWE getting fired, dude, I went to New Japan, won the television title from Tanahashi's son. Then I went to Mexico and beat Commander for the AAA championship. And then I'm going to win the MLW championship on top of the Combat One championship I already have and all these other. Dude, I have like a stack of 8 championships in my house right now. So it's like, and now some people might be like, yeah, but it's not WWE. I'm like, dude, I'm happy.
Hmm.
So it's like I don't know what to say. Like I get it, dude. And being before WWE, and I remember saying this to my family and friends. I'm like, dude, if I never make it to WWE, I'll be happy. I'll feel like because my indie run, and even now, it's like I'm a cult classic. I'm like
Hmm.
Evil Dead. It's
Yep.
like I'm not the #1 movie in the box office, but the people that watch me and know me
Hmm.
get it and love me and will follow me. And that's what it's about, dude.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Dude, thick skin, be tough, train.
Hmm.
Train. Don't give, if there's anything they could question or doubt you on, make up for it one way or another with your promos, with your character. And that's the other thing. A lot of people try to be some weird character. Don't be some weird character, dude. Nobody can relate to that. The era of the Undertakers is mostly over. Right now, bro, you gotta be like legit, you gotta be real, you gotta have charisma. And that's what it's always been with more characters. I feel like today's society, look at the streamers. Streamers aren't playing some crazy character. They play a version of themselves that's
Hmm.
entertaining enough to draw people in. It's basically what we do in professional wrestling, but we do it with our bodies in the ring and we tell stories. That's what we do. So if you're gonna try to be a pro wrestler, get in shape. Don't give them a reason not to put you on TV. Look good. Dude, like that's the number one thing. It's a cause, dude. It's look. You gotta
Hmm.
look good, and then if you have the in-ring ability and can talk, those three things. Be able to talk, look good, and wrestle. You can do those three things. And fourth thing, which you can't really control, is that charisma button. You got to be able to be, people want to
Hmm.
see you or hate you. You don't want to just be there. People either got to love you or hate you. And for some reason, from my UFC career, from high school wrestling, everything, people either love me or hate me. And in pro wrestling, it's probably the most valuable, or even fighting. People either love Conor McGregor or they hate him.
Hmm.
Mike Perry, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. All these people are loved and hated. Nobody out there has no opinion on any of those people. Somebody has an opinion. Every person has an
Hmm.
opinion on all those people, good or bad. But that's what's important. That's the value. That's the charisma.
Hmm.
So,
Where can people reach out to you at?
hey, you can find me on Instagram at Super King of Bros and on Twitter. Or wait, no, that's Twitter. Instagram, Riddle Bro. Twitter at Super King of Bros, and Facebook I really don't use. I don't do the TikTok. I don't believe conspiracy theories, but I heard China's trying to make us dumb. So I don't know. I stay off the TikTok. I have a lot of stuff on my phone. I don't need, people. Not like I matter, but you know what I'm saying. Just
Hmm.
in case.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to do this. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling, what you continue to do, sir. It was an honor to talk to you today.
Brian, I appreciate the time. Thank you. I'm glad we made it work, and I wish you nothing but great days and years of success, bro.
Thank you, sir. You as well. And if there's ever anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
Sounds good, Brian. Take care.